The 2023-2024 FAFSA has been released. Now, if you've never completed the FAFSA before, it might seem a bit overwhelming, but we're going to walk you through and let you see and experience how the FAFSA kind of works. Now, once again, this is going to be a demo, so your numbers are going to be the numbers you're going to input based on your own personal situation. But let's go through as a student and a parent, kind of filling it out just so you can see how it works and get yourself prepared. Studentaid.gov is the federal student aid's website where you can actually find the latest FAFSA form. Right at the top, you'll see right there that it says FAFSA form. When you highlight it in the navigation, you can go to complete the FAFSA form, and it'll bring you essentially to a screen to check your status and to basically tell FAFSA who you are. Are you the student? Are you the parent or preparer? When it comes to filling out the FAFSA belongs to the student. The FAFSA does not belong to the parent. Even if parents, you're the one helping your student complete the FAFSA, it's actually their application. It's not your application. So a question that we get a lot from parents is that they've already completed the FAFSA for one of their children and they want to know if they can add their other child to their account now that they're going to go to college. Actually, each student will need their own FAFSA form completed, and parents, that basically means it's not your form. You actually want to default to understanding that each student or each child will need to complete their own form, and that form belongs to them. You'll also see a little bit more about that once you dive into the FAFSA, because when it starts referencing you, that means the student. It does not mean the parent. If it's looking for parent information, it will be specifically asking for parent information. So you don't want to get through the whole form and figure out at the very end you accidentally put all your information as the parent in the form. So just remember, this belongs to the student. Okay, so let's go in and let FAFSA know that we are the student. I'm going in as a student and I'm going to be completing the form. Once you identify who you are, you can hit login and continue. Now you're going to need an FSA ID in order to log in. If you don't have an FSA ID, you can actually click right from the screen to create one. In order to create an FSA ID, you need to have a social security number. If you don't have a social security number, you may not be able to create the FSA ID, and essentially this mainly can be an issue for parents. If you're not a citizen of the United States, that doesn't mean your student can't complete the form. All that means is that you can actually still go ahead and input your information, but when it comes time to sign, if you don't have an FSA ID, you can't sign and submit online. You actually would have to print a signature page and mail it to the address on there. But that shouldn't stop you from using the online version, because there are ways you can get around that at the very end. So once you go into the login, once again, you want to put in your FSA ID. Your FSA ID is essentially a username and password. Pretty common type of setup. If you had one before and you forget what it is, you actually have the option to recover it with forget username or forget password and go through that process. There are some questions you would have set up, and then there's some other ways you can reset it once you get there if that becomes a problem. So let's go in and start filling out the FAFSA. You're going to basically read through the disclaimer that pops up. Then you want to accept or decline. If you don't accept, you can't move forward. So we're going to accept the disclaimer, and it's going to log us right into your account. Since you use your FSA ID to log in, some of the information is going to be pre-populated for you. So the online FAFSA form actually has what's known as skip logic. Skip logic essentially means the FAFSA is only going to ask you questions that it needs answers for. If it already has answers that maybe ruled out the need for an additional question, you're not going to see that question on the FAFSA. You might notice that if you talk to some other people who said, oh, I got this question, I didn't know how to answer it, you might be thinking, oh, I didn't get that question. That's completely fine. There could have been some skip logic in the application online that already determined that you didn't need to specifically answer every single question that could be available on the FAFSA form. If you're filling out the paper application, of course, you'll be presented with every question because there's no way to eliminate questions on the paper application, but online there is some skip logic added in there for you. So you're going to get the option to essentially start the FAFSA. Every year, especially if you're doing this right at October, you might have an option of 2 different FAFSA forms. There is a little bit of overlap. So essentially here we're going to see start the 2023-2024 FAFSA form, or you have the option for the 2022-2023 FAFSA form. 2023-2024, that's essentially what we're going to be calling your award year or your academic year for FAFSA purposes. So if your classes start July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, that's the FAFSA you want to complete. If that's when your academic year is going to be started, in between those dates, that's the form you would pick. If you're doing this because you're going to a school that doesn't have a traditional admissions, a fall, spring, summer, you can kind of enroll whenever you want, you still might have a need for the 2022-2023 FAFSA form if your classes or your term will start July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. If you're a high school student applying essentially for next fall, you're going to be doing this 2023-2024 FAFSA form. This is the one you're going to want to pick. If you have any questions about which form you should be choosing, if you go to the Edvisors FAFSA deadlines article, or you're following along in our Edvisors FAFSA guide, we've got a great chart in there that'll help you determine which FAFSA you want to complete. If not, if you're still confused, you can always call your financial aid office and ask them which FAFSA application you should be completing. So we're going to be choosing the 2023-2024. The save key. Now, this is a temporary use. This means essentially that you can start the FAFSA, maybe not finish it, and come back to it later, and you just have to input your save key. This is also helpful if you need to provide parental information, because if you provide your parent with your save key, they can log into your application and complete their parts that they need to complete in order for you to submit your FAFSA. They can also use this to get into your FAFSA to sign and submit it all online if they're able to do so. You want to make this something you'll remember and something you won't forget. Another great tip when you're completing the FAFSA, you'll start to see these little question marks and circles next to each and question or where you're going to be inputting an answer. If you've got any questions about that particular question, clicking that question box will give you more information about what you need to do in order to answer that one question. Save keys must be between 4 and 8 characters long. That's just an example of how these question marks, if you ever get stuck, you'll get more information on how to answer that question there. There's a lot of information that's captured in this FAFSA, and it can feel a little confusing. What's great is there's a great introductory step here that will tell you about what you should be expecting, and if you need any help, you can expand these to get some information about different resources available or some commonly asked questions before people get started. So feel free and read those as you see fit in order to help you through the application. Now, we're going to get a reminder here that the FAFSA belongs to the student. You and you are always, unless otherwise noted, referring to the student. And the great thing, there's also kind of a map up here that will tell you the different sections you need to go through. There's 7 total sections you have to go through when you're completing the FAFSA. Don't panic yet. It's really not so crazy once you start getting into the questions, but it's just going to let you follow along to let you know how far you've gotten. If for some reason you're not required to provide parental information or parent information, it'll skip over these 2 steps pretty quickly. You're not even going to have to worry about them. But many students do have to provide parent information, so it'll bring you through these steps as well. One thing you'll notice is there's a student demographics and a parent demographics. There's a parent financials and a student financials section. So they're pretty similar questions, slightly modified for each individual. One thing I want to tell everybody when completing the FAFSA, read the questions carefully and answer for exactly what they're asking for. And another thing, be sure you're being thorough, but don't let yourself get too tripped up if you start overthinking or start getting confused about what it's asking. Really, rely on these question marks to help you through if you get stuck. Or double check edvisors.com. We've got some great FAQs and great explanation along with our FAFSA guide that may answer some of the questions you have. So there are some resources out there if you do get stuck. But I'll tell you some of the places where I feel like parents or students get a little bit in their head and start overthinking a little bit on some of these questions, and it can feel overwhelming. But let's try to bring that down by going through step by step. As you see, this is all pre-filled. This is your student demographic information, and the student, this is your FAFSA. Your FSA ID account, when you logged in, already has this basic information about yourself. Now, here's the thing. You want to still double check that it's correct. If there is something wrong, you're going to have to resolve that. If for some reason your social security number is showing up wrong, maybe your last name, you want to get that resolved. If not, you might get a flag that your FAFSA is going to be unable to be submitted, an issue with the social security check, and you're going to have to work through it later. So if you're seeing anything that's incorrect, this is a place where you can stop and see if there's anything that needs to be done to correct your FSA ID or work through any issues you have with social security. It does happen every once in a while. It doesn't happen to many people, but it does happen, and that can be an issue later, or it might be an issue once you submit. Now, your contact information, once again, keep in mind this is information you've shared with your FSA ID. So this is going to be pre-filled. I always recommend providing your contact information, even this information that's not already pre-filled. So your telephone number, I recommend putting in there. If there's some reason someone needs to contact you or your school is looking for additional information, it's really helpful for them to have different ways to contact you and resolve any issues. Now, double check your email here. One thing I would say about email, make sure this is an email that you expect to be using in the long term. And I'm not talking about just while you're attending a specific school. I mean actual long term, a few years, maybe 5-10 years. With this particular email, you want to make sure it's an email that you can be contacted on even after you separate with school. So just make sure you're using an email address that you will be using even after maybe you graduate from a particular school, because as we know, many colleges, universities, even high schools now will cut off access to your school email after a certain period of time, and you won't be able to get that correspondence from federal student aid or the U.S. Department of Education. Now here you're going to see your student address. Once again, this is pre-filled because this is coming from FSA ID. You want to use your permanent mailing address. Now this came from your FSA ID, but this is a great time to double check the contact information on your FSA ID account. The reason for that, once again, you want to make sure that if you need to be contacted, your school or the different schools that you're applying for financial aid for can mail you information if they need to. You don't necessarily want to use a school address, especially if it's not your permanent address, because that could change. So essentially, we're looking at what is on your license. Now, based on the information you provided from your permanent address, it's going to ask you if you lived in that state for at least 5 years. This is for a student who lives in Maryland. You would answer honestly, yes or no. Now it's going to ask you if you're a U.S. citizen. If you're a U.S. citizen, go ahead and say yes. Now there's several eligible non-citizens that can complete the FAFSA. Now there is a category for no, I am not a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. And these individuals, even though you can complete the FAFSA form, you may not be able to sign it online. And also you may not be eligible for federal student aid, but chances are you're completing this form because your school asked you to complete the form, which means they might have some institutional aid or there might be some state aid you're eligible for. So go ahead, it's actually not going to stop you if you select that option. I can show you here. It'll just take you to the next set of questions. For these demo purposes, we're going to be choosing yes, I am a U.S. citizen to continue forward to see that experience. Now just basic demographics. So it's going to ask you your high school completion status. Choose the answer that is most applicable to you. It's going to ask you what college degree or certificate will you be working towards in the 2023-2024 school year. When you click this down, you're going to see first bachelor, second bachelor's, associate degree options, certificates, teaching credentials, college, graduate, professional degree. Go ahead and choose the answer that is most applicable to you. Some people might be wondering the difference between a first bachelor's degree and a second bachelor's degree. It's important in the world of financial aid because if you're getting your first bachelor's degree, you could be eligible for a lot of different grants. Now, a lot of grants have restrictions like the federal Pell Grant that you can only earn a Pell Grant until you graduated and successfully completed a bachelor's degree. Once you have one, you actually are no longer eligible in most situations for additional Pell Grant funds. We're going to choose first bachelor's degree. It's going to double check to ask you if you already have a bachelor's degree before beginning this year. Based on this answer, it actually already pre-selected no for us because we said first bachelor's degree. And what would your grade level be? Answer this question to the best of your knowledge. It might seem like you would know the answer to this, but your school will be the one who will ultimately determine what year you are in school. The reason this is important is because there could be some annual loan limits based on the year that you are in school. The school will classify you as well. So you want to go through and choose the answer that's most applicable to you. And then finally, you're going to be asked if you're interested in being considered for work study. I always say yes. I always recommend everyone choose the answer yes. If you want to be considered for work study, that does not mean you're required to participate if you're awarded work study funds. It just means you have the option to participate if you are looking for a part-time job when you're enrolled in school. Work study, federal work study, is part of a financial aid package. So if for some reason you chose no, it's not the end of the world. You can still talk to financial aid and have work study awarded to you. But it's just something where if you just say yes now and you choose not to do it, it's not going to hurt you in any way. It would just mean that you didn't actually earn those funds. Keep in mind, federal work study, do not expect it to be financial aid you receive all at once. You actually have to earn this. It's considered a form of earned aid, working a part-time job and earning a paycheck. So this could take you a few weeks or entire semester to earn the total amount of federal work study funds that you were awarded on your financial aid award letter. The school will have a book of jobs that you could be eligible for and that you can choose from. So I always recommend saying yes to this question. Now you also have the option here to put in your student driver's license. You're not required to have a driver's license to complete the FAFSA, but you do have the option to input this information here. So go ahead, pull out your driver's license if you have one, and start importing your number. And of course you would put the number that you see there in the state from which it is issued. So now you're going to be answering a question. This is an interesting question in the student demographics section because it's actually a question that seems like it should be in the dependency status question, which is step 3. But it's essentially going to be asking you if you are a foster youth or if you were in the foster care system at any time. Answer this question honestly based on your current situation. And then you want to identify from the best of your ability if the highest school completed by parent 1 and parent 2. The FAFSA has pulled away, as they should have, from identifying parent 1 and parent 2 as mom or dad. So you're not necessarily going to see that terminology on here too much. It does show up every once in a while, but not so much. So just keep clear who parent 1 is, parent 2 is, because that might be something you need to fix or deal with later. But for right now, just answer the question to the best of your knowledge. You actually have an option to say other or unknown when it comes to highest school completed. Now you're going to be adding the high school that you attended. Now, since we identified that we were a high school diploma recipient, it's time to list your high school from the list provided here. So essentially, you will search for your high school. You're going to choose the state in which your high school is located. You have the option to add a city or a high school name, and that will make the list a lot shorter to choose from. Now, not everyone goes to college directly out of high school, so if for some reason you moved around a lot or you're not exactly sure of the name, you can always complete the search that you need to. So choose your high school. If you can't find your school, you actually have the option to click that here, and then you can try to add it in here as well. It'll ask you to verify the high school that you picked, and if it's correct, you can just go ahead and move forward. Now for your school list. These are the schools, so you actually don't need to know exactly where you're going to college in order to complete the FAFSA. You can actually choose up to 10 colleges at a time to put on your FAFSA application. If you have more than 10 colleges, I would recommend completing the FAFSA, signing and submitting, waiting a few days, maybe confirming with one of those schools that they received your Edvisor report, which is essentially the school's version of your student aid report. And then you can actually log back into the FAFSA and change your school list, remove some of the schools that already have your information and add some additional schools that you would like to have your information sent to. Once again, you can go ahead and put as much information as you already know. If you already know your school's federal school code, which could be on your school's website, or you just already have it pulled, you can type that right in directly. If you're not sure, you can just go ahead and start picking a school by searching just by state, and you can even do city. Some people like to do this just to get an idea of the different schools and areas they're interested in attending school. You can use this to also help field your search. You can go ahead and click that. The more information you put in here, the more narrowed down your search results will be. And you can go ahead and pick a school. See, it has all the different pages you can click through here. Then you're going to hit continue. It's going to ask you your housing plan. That's because your school's cost of attendance, or essentially your student budget, is going to be based on how you identify your living situation. So here are your options. Are you going to be living on campus, with a parent, or off campus? Because that could affect how much the school will estimate you need in order to attend their particular school. So this student lives in Maryland and they're looking at a school in San Diego, California. It's most likely that they're going to need to live on campus. Now, once you choose that, you can see here you can add an additional school. So it brings you through the same type of process. So if you're not quite sure where you want to go, you can use this to help you get some school ideas of different areas of schools that are there. Obviously, there are a lot of other tools. You don't have to wait till you're on the FAFSA, but you can actually start looking in these areas as well. And like I said, you can add up to 10 schools. If you're applying to more, you're just going to have to go in and make a change to your existing FAFSA application. Just go ahead and choose the school you were looking for. We're going to add 2 schools for this particular FAFSA application, but you can always come in and add more. You can always come in and make changes to your school list. Now, here's one of those questions that sometimes can be overthought a bit. When you submit your FAFSA form, there are a few questions that it will ask you your status as of today. It's not asking your status as of yesterday or your future plans. So essentially, what is your marital status of today? This question is not asking, are you engaged, planning to get married in the next 6 months? It's asking you, as of today, the day you're completing the FAFSA, what is your marital status? So just answer the question based on your situation. We're going to be answering single for this particular application. If you've noticed, we've jumped into the dependency status questions. Dependency status is incredibly important for FAFSA purposes. This has nothing to do with how you file your taxes, how your parents file their taxes. This has to do for FAFSA purposes. Are you considered a dependent student or an independent student? This determination only needs to be made if you're an undergraduate student. All graduate students will be considered independent students. When it comes to undergraduate, the FAFSA will need to determine if you are a dependent undergraduate student or an independent undergraduate student. If you're considered independent, you would not be providing any parent information. Dependent undergraduate students do have to provide parent information. So there's several questions on here. Once again, you're not going to see all of them necessarily. One of them is going to ask you, as of January 1st, are you under the age of 24? The FAFSA already has that information from your FSA ID account and your birth date there, so it's not going to have to ask you that question. It already knows if it's asking you dependency status questions that you are under the age of 24. So now it's going to ask you the additional questions to see if there's any reason that you should be considered an independent student. But once again, this is for FAFSA purposes only. We're actually going to be answering the questions as a dependent undergraduate student, so we can see the parent questions come up. Like I said, if you're considered an independent student, you're not required to provide parent information. It will give you the option if you want to provide parent information. Some schools may request it, but for the most part, if you're an independent undergraduate student or independent graduate student, you do not or are not required to provide that parent information. It's going to ask you if you have dependent children who will receive more than half of their support between the dates July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. Answer this question honestly based on your current situation. If you have any other dependents other than a child or a spouse, will receive more than half of your support between now and June 30th, 2024. Now is another key word here because that is essentially saying as of the day you're completing this. So literally between now and the end of June 30th, 2024. Answer this question honestly. Answering yes to either one of these questions will classify you as an independent student. But like I said, for this particular walkthrough, we will be keeping the answers to qualify the student as a dependent undergraduate student. And here are some more dependency questions. These are more grouped together, and you're just going to check off any that apply. Read each option carefully. They're very specific. And if you happen to fall into any of these categories, you want to make sure you answer these correctly to be correctly identified as an independent student and not have to provide parent information. You can always go back and make edits if you think you answered a question incorrectly or you feel like you didn't really understand the question. Remember, you have the question mark here to get additional information. And because these are so incredibly specific and can be hard to interpret right away, they actually will bring you to other pages provided by federal student aid in order to break down what each of these questions is asking if you are confused or aren't sure how it applies to your situation. As of now, we're just going to say none of the above because we're keeping our student dependent. And finally, you're going to get a question about student homelessness. It's essentially asking, as of on or after July 1, 2022, were you homeless or were you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? If you're confused about what that means or you're confused if this applies to you, you can always click on the question mark to get additional information to see what that means. So now this is saying you are a dependent student. It's already made that determination for FAFSA purposes. Now you have the option here to say, I will provide information about my parent or parents. And if you're unable to provide information about your parent or parents, there's actually a walkthrough. We'll click through to see what that looks like, but not every dependent undergraduate student is in a situation where their parents are willing or able to provide information to them. And if you are falling in one of those categories, essentially, you will see the steps that the FAFSA will ask. It'll tell you the impact of not providing parent information, which essentially means, you're not going to get a EFC. You'll have to work with your college to determine your financial aid package. You'll be able to provide this information to them. It's just you're not going to get that EFC at the very end. You're going to have to wait a little bit to work through the issue with your school. If you completed a FAFSA application before with parent information, it's not going to transfer anything in. You could be limited to the types of federal student aid you're eligible to receive, especially if you do not qualify for a dependency status override. And that actually will be on a few screens ahead. And it will tell you you have to follow up with your financial aid administrator at the school you plan to attend. So it's going to bring you through some special circumstances. Special circumstances may allow you to qualify for what's known as a dependency override. So the school may be able to, even though based on the way you answer the questions, they were correct, and there's nothing else you can really do with the FAFSA application, they could determine that you qualify for dependency override and you will be an independent student from that point. However, it's a very specific, special circumstances are very specific. So if for some reason you do not qualify, and these are some reasons you would not be considered to have a special circumstance, And that could just be that you don't live with your parents, or your parents are just refusing to provide you with financial support or information. These are not reasons to qualify for an actual dependency override, but it will allow you to go ahead and still complete the FAFSA, but you would only be considered for unsubsidized loan funds. So if you're an undergraduate student, you may not be eligible for that Pell Grant or a direct subsidized loan. You would only be eligible for unsubsidized loan funds. One of the reasons it'll keep asking you, or it'll ask you again, is because it just wants to make sure you understand that maybe if it's just something that you don't want to deal with getting your parent information, or it's just something that you'd rather not do, you might want to consider it if it is at all possible to get your parent to provide the information, because you could be eligible for additional financial aid. So if eventually you decide, okay, I don't really qualify for these circumstances, and I talk to my parents and they are willing to provide it, then you can go through and say, I will provide information about my parents. If you have a special circumstance, you can click that here, let them know that you believe you have a special circumstance that will qualify you for a dependency override. You can work through that with your school. And if you don't have a special circumstance and you kind of fall into this group of here of what would not be considered a special circumstance, you can say, I'm going to continue with my FAFSA form, provide no parent information, and I'm only going to be applying for an unsubsidized loan. Here we're going to choose, I will provide my parent information. That's essentially like saying we would provide parent information at the beginning of that step, right before we got into those questions about parent information. So if you went through those screens, that's okay, you can keep going through. Now, if you're required to provide your parent information, not everyone's parent situation is the same. So you need to determine which parent or parents' information you need to provide on your FAFSA form. Essentially determining who your FAFSA parent is can be one of the most challenging parts, especially if your parents are not living together, never been married, or divorced. But let's go through the different scenarios it could be, and then you can determine who your FAFSA parent is. If your parents are living together, married or unmarried, you would be providing the information of both of your parents. It doesn't matter if your parents have never been married, they're a same-sex couple, they're separated or divorced. If they're living together, you will include both of them. If your parents are not living together, then you may need to determine who your FAFSA parent is. Now, if your parents are married and not separated, you would need to provide the information for both parents. If your parents are not married, you will need to go through, if your parents are not married or separated, but not yet legally divorced and do not live together, you'll need to do essentially a 3-part test to determine who your FAFSA parent is. The first, and you stop actually once you get an answer to the question. So you may not have to go through all 3 steps. The first question you're going to ask is, with whom did I live with most during the past 12 months? If you're unable to determine that and you lived with them equally, then you would ask, who provided me with the most financial support for the last 12 months when I was receiving financial support from my parents? Now, like that's not saying in the last 12 months, it's just saying the last 12 months of when you were receiving financial support, and that's who you would pick. If you really don't know who to choose, you're really stuck or you're confused, you would then have to go talk to your financial aid office and ask them whose information I should be providing on the FAFSA. If you have questions here, the FAFSA will also break this down for you as well. If the parent you're providing information for is remarried, you would actually have to provide that information on the FAFSA. Your parent will have to provide the information on the FAFSA for themselves and their spouse. If you were legally adopted, then you would provide that information for your adoptive parent or parents on the FAFSA. Legal guardians, other guardians like a grandparent, aunt, a foster parent, or a sibling are not considered parents when you are completing the FAFSA unless they have legally adopted you. If they have not legally adopted you, you would not be providing the information of your guardian. You actually would have to go back and ask your FAFSA parent, whichever one you decide is the one applicable that meets the criteria of either you lived with most the last 12 months, or if the one who gave you the most financial support, the last 12 months you were receiving financial support. If you're confused or you're not sure if you answered the dependency questions correctly, you can actually go back and double check those answers. The great thing about this little status bar is that you can actually click and go back to other parts of the application and make sure you answered them correctly, the information correctly. So let's go through. Now this is another one. Parent marital status also sometimes creates a lot of questions for parents completing the FAFSA. Now keep in mind the wording. As of today, what is the marital status of your parents? It's not asking what happened last year, and it's not asking what's going to happen in the future. It's as of the day you're completing the FAFSA. You want to go through and answer the question appropriately. When did your parents get married or remarried? And go through and put the date. Now, since you said your parents are married or remarried, it's going to ask you the information of your first parent, father, mother, or step-parent. Whoever you're identifying as your first parent, make sure you keep that consistent throughout the application. Once again, this is something that if you wanted your parents to provide this information, you could save your application, you could give them your save key, and they can log in and input this information if you would like. Parents, if you're the ones completing or doing this together with your student, you can put in the information here. But up here, if you ever need to stop or want to hand off control, you can hit Save FAFSA Form. You can exit and then make sure when you come back in to use that save key that you remember. Remember, it's the key that's easy to remember for you, but not easy for someone else to guess. So you'd have to give your save key to your parent. So go ahead and put in your parent's social security number. Go ahead and put in your parent's last name. First initial, it's not asking full name here, just an initial. Your parents' date of birth and your parents' email address. And just a second time to make sure you spell it correctly. You're also going to go through now and enter your parents, the other parent. So this could be father, mother, step-parent. Remember, keep which parent you're identifying as your first parent and the other parent clear so you can easily know who you're talking about. But go ahead and input their information, their last name and first initial and their date of birth. Now it's going to ask you for your parents' state of legal residence. Answer this question appropriately. It's going to pick the state that you had first, so you can go ahead or say yes or no. Okay, so now we're going to get into household size. If you're an independent student for FAFSA purposes, you'll get your version of this question in your student financial section. And the way it's worded is going to be slightly different. So just make sure when you read through, you're reading carefully to understand what it's asking you to provide on here. Now, this is specific to FAFSA purposes only. This has nothing to do with how you claimed dependents on your taxes. You want to just read how FAFSA is asking for this information and answer it honestly that way. So for parents of dependent undergraduate students, it'll ask your parent if they have any other dependent children, and to include dependent children if they will rely on your parents for more than half of their financial support between July 1, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. Or if your parent can answer no to every dependency status question on the FAFSA form for that child. So you want to go through and put in a number here. You also see this warning, do not include yourself, the student. So if you include yourself, you'll be double counting yourself. So you don't want to do that. You only want to do this, say, if you have another sibling or another two siblings to see if they qualify to be counted for FAFSA purposes to be part of the parent's household. How many other dependents do your parents have? So dependents don't necessarily have to be children. They can be anyone who lives with your parent and receives more than half of their support and will continue to receive more than half of their financial support from your parents between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. Not everyone is going to have the same situation, so just carefully read these questions and make sure you're answering them based on what FAFSA is asking for. Additional information on how to answer these questions, once again, can be found from clicking on the question mark near the input field. And you're going to go ahead and continue. The FAFSA now is going to tell you what your household size is. It will also now ask you the number of your household in college. Out of the 3 dependents in your parents' household as shown above, how many will be college students between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024? It says do not include your parents, but do include yourself here and other members of the household. So this number at least has to be 1. Once again, you're going to go ahead and click the question mark if you want some more information about who you should be including as a dependent in the household who will be attending college. Now we're going to get into financials. All right, let's look at tax filing status, one of the top areas for questions on the FAFSA application. On the FAFSA form is how to input income and assets. If you're providing parent information, we're going to be going through parent information first. For the 2023-2024 FAFSA form, your base year or your base tax year is going to be 2021. So you will be using your 2021 tax returns to help you complete the information on the FAFSA. For 2021, have your parents completed their IRS tax return or another tax return. So you're going to go through your options are already completed, will file, not going to file. Answer the question appropriately here. Since this is looking for prior year, 2 tax years ago, chances are your parents have already completed their tax return, but there are some scenarios where that may not be true. Answer the question appropriately. FAFSA will guide you through to let you know what to do. So if you've already completed, it'll ask you to keep going on. Will file, it actually will allow you to keep going as well. However, it's going to basically ask you to provide information on what you expect and not going to file. It's going to say that you're not eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool, but it'll ask you to keep going. So for this purpose of this demo, we're going to say already completed. What type of income tax return did your parents file for 2021? It's asking this to determine if you're able to use the IRS data retrieval tool or IRS DRT. If you select to use the IRS DRT, it will input the information. It'll take you to another page. It will allow you to import your tax information that the IRS has on file for you. One thing you should know, if you decide to use the IRS DRT, you will not be able to see the information that is imported. That's actually a protection for you, your parent, and the student, whoever's providing the information on the FAFSA application. However, some parents or some students don't feel comfortable submitting a form without knowing exactly what's being included on there, may question that the information was imported correctly on your FAFSA, and they might be concerned with that. And the only way to work through those issues is with your financial aid office directly. However, you're not required, and not everyone can use the IRS DRT. If you filed a tax return with Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, or a freely associated state, and then you go through and say for 2021, what's your parents' tax filing according to their tax return, you can see here that it'll flag you saying you are not eligible to transfer your information from the IRS data retrieval tool into this FAFSA form. It will also say that if you have a foreign tax return that you filed. However, if we switch to IRS Form 1040, married filing joint, it will say applying is faster and easier, and you can import the information from the IRS DRT. And it'll warn you here for your protection, your tax return information will not display on the IRS website or on the FAFSA form. Now, filing status will also affect your ability to import the information from the IRS DRT. If you file separate, married filing separate, it will tell you you're not eligible. If you do head of household, same kind of thing. You choose single, it's actually not going to allow you to import either because you identified as being married. So the FAFSA is thinking that the information is not going to be complete. We're going to do married filing joint. Even though we have the option to use the IRS DRT, we will not be using the IRS DRT. And anyone who's not able to use the IRS DRT, you can actually complete and input the information manually. If you're eligible to use the IRS DRT, it's going to let you know one more time that you have the option to do it. For this particular demonstration, we will not be using the IRS DRT, so we're going to say no thanks, but you do have the option, and it allows you to make that decision again if you would like to. So now you're going to be using your IRS forms in order to complete the FAFSA. The great thing about these questions is that it's going to tell you exactly from the IRS Form 1040 which line to find this information from. You hit the question mark as well. It will let you know some more information about this particular question. It's going to tell you how it's going to look if it's transferred from the IRS. It's going to be pre-filled with that, but once again, you're not going to be able to see that actual number. It's not going to let you leave it blank unless your parents identify that they would not be filing a tax return. We said in this demonstration that they are. And your AGI could include more than wages earned, and it gives you some additional examples here. It tells you very clearly what line you'll find that information on your IRS Form 1040. You also have the ability to use Income Estimator to break down to figure out your AGI. Your adjusted gross income, or AGI, you go ahead and input that information here. Now we said married, filing joint. So it's going to ask you, parent 1 and parent 2, how much should parent 1 earn and how much should parent 2 earn? And go ahead and put that here. Now I'm using very simple numbers. It may not be exactly how you input the information, and it may not be as simple as these numbers here. Answer the question based on what it's asking for. It'll tell you exactly where you need to look, or if there's anything you need to be adding or calculating together. Then it's going to ask you your parents' income tax for 2021. So now there could be additional questions for parents who are tax filers only. And it's going to ask you, did your parents have any of the following items? Enter amounts for all that apply. The answers can be 0. So if the answer is 0, go ahead and leave it alone. If the answer is not 0, go ahead and update that information based on your parents' tax filing. Combat pay or special combat pay, this should be 0 for enlisted persons and warrant officers, because combat pay is entirely non-taxable. Only enter taxable combat pay included in your parents' adjusted gross income. Student college grants and scholarship aid reported to the IRS and your parents' income. Includes AmeriCorps benefits, as well as grants and scholarship portions of fellowships and assistantships. Now, as you notice, this is not just scholarships. This is scholarship aid reported to the IRS in your parents' income. If your parent received a grant or a scholarship that was not reported to the IRS and not included in your parent income, you would not be putting any number in here. It will remain 0. But if for some reason you did have to report this as income to the IRS, go ahead and update that amount. Education credits, which are American Opportunity Tax Credits or Lifetime Learning Credits. It'll tell you exactly in your 1040 where you should be finding that information. Chances are, if this is the first time you're going to school, you're the first child to go to school in your household, and your parents haven't been going to school in the last few years, chances are this will remain 0. But just base it on the way you see it on your parents' tax transcripts or their tax returns. Untaxed portions of IRA distributions and pensions from Form 1040, excluding rollovers. Once again, this number can be 0, but if you have something on these lines and you follow the instructions, include it here. IRA deductions and payments to self-employed SEP, Simple, KEO, and other qualified plans from the IRS 1040 Schedule 1. Just go through and see if there's anything you have to report here on the tax return or tax transcript. And then tax-exempt interest income from the IRS Form 1040. So go through, read these carefully. For some, all these answers will remain 0. For others, you might have to update these numbers. And then additional financial information. Did your parents have any of the following items in 2021? Keep in mind, we're asking for information from 2021, so it's not your current year. Child support your parents paid because of a divorce or separation or as a result of a legal requirement. Now, keep in mind, this is saying child support paid, not child support received. So you would report that if that applies to any your parents in this situation. Now, earnings from a work under a co-op program offered by a college, or this next one here from federal work study or need-based employment portions of fellowships and assistantships. You want to answer these honestly because you might have an opportunity to have this income excluded from the way your FAFSA is calculated. So that might actually help you lower your family's expected contribution. So you want to make sure to include that and include that income for those very specific reasons. Now, untaxed income. So this is actually asking for untaxed income your parent could have received. Keep in mind, we're looking back to 2021. We're not looking for anything that's happening currently today. We're actually looking for the information based on your parents' income in 2021. Now, here is where you would input child support received for all children. It'll also ask you additional questions, so you want to go through and read each one of these carefully to see if there's any untaxed income that you need to claim on the FAFSA form. Like I said, many of these things may be zero, and you can leave them as zero if they're applicable. Jumping into parent assets. Now, there are such things as reportable assets and non-reportable assets. So as you're considering this, you want to understand the difference. Edvisors.com has a great article about parent and student income information and asset information. And you want to make sure to take a look at that article to see what's considered a reportable asset and a non-reportable asset. Obviously, the more assets you have to report, the higher your expected family contribution will be, which may limit your eligibility for need-based aid and other types of financial assistance. But you want to be honest about what you are including or excluding here based on the rules. You can click on this particular hyperlink in the question. You just want to look to see here for more information on how you want to include, how you will be including this information in the FAFSA. Here it very simply states what assets to include. So if you have money or cash in a savings or a checking account, a business, investment farms, and other investments, you would answer, and if that value is more than zero, you would answer yes to this question. And then you also want to double check here because there's a little more information on the question mark of which assets you will not be including. We're going to be answering yes. Now, one more thing to note, if for some reason your parents' financial information is lower than a very specific threshold and you meet other requirements, you may not be presented with any asset questions at all if that is the case. So essentially, there are some income requirements that your parents have to exceed in order to be even considered, before the FAFSA will even consider to ask you asset information. So as of today, we already answered the question if your parents' assets exceed $0. As of today, it's going to ask you the total current balance of cash, savings, and checking accounts. So look at the wording of this question. It's very specific. It's saying, as of today, what is your parents' total current cash balance? It's not asking 2021 information. It's not asking about future information. It's asking as of today. So you want to go ahead and answer this question appropriately. As of today, what is the net worth of your parents' investments, including real estate? But it will very clearly say not your parents' home or your principal residence is another way you will see that stated. If you're a little confused, if there's more than one home, you can click the question mark to get some information about what they're asking here. This is all investments and other types of real estate. If your parents don't have any of those, you can keep that to zero. Then it's going to ask you what's the current net worth of your parents' current business and or investment farms. It's going to ask you to not include a family farm or a family business with 100 or fewer full-time or full-time equivalent employees. So if your parents do have a family farm or a family business, you want to go through and you might want to double check with the question mark of what they're asking you to report here and if it applies to your specific situation. You can't, if these aren't pre-filled with zeros, you cannot leave this blank. It will flag you that you need to put an answer here. But if there's no additional family business or a family farm, you can just go ahead and hit 0 and leave that there. And it'll let you move forward. You made it through parents, you made it through providing your parents' demographic information and your parent financial information. Now we're going to move on to you, the student, the owner of the FAFSA form, to go through and put in your information. You will notice some of these questions are extremely similar to what you had to put in for your parent information, but just read it to see how it applies to you specifically. And also the questions might be worded slightly differently, or there might be additional questions that were asked specifically to students or how they want students to report that information. So you can go through, and we went through some of these, so this might be a little bit faster in the demo walkthrough, and we can go through and answer the questions here. This is just determining if you're going to be eligible for the IRS DRT, and also to let the FAFSA know what type of tax return you filed, or if you did not file a tax return. And now it's going to recommend that you use the IRS data retrieval tool. We're not going to be doing that for this particular demo, so we're going to skip that. It's going to give you that warning again saying that it would be easier if you would like to do it. Same kind of thing, if you decide to use the IRS DRT, the information would be masked. You would not be able to see it. Now, same kind of questions we saw with your parents. AGI or your adjusted gross income for 2021, so you'd go ahead and input that appropriately. Tells you where you can find that information on your IRS form. And then it's going to ask you how much do you earn from working in 2021. This may be the same or slightly different than your AGI. It's going to ask you the amount of income tax for 2021. And now for student questions for tax filers only. So if you didn't file your taxes, you probably won't be seeing these questions. However, if you did file taxes, you will be going through and answering these. Once again, read these carefully. They might be the same exact question you saw for your parents, or they might be slightly different. So just make sure to read it through carefully. They're pre-filled with zeros, but you can change it if anything applies. Go ahead and leave them 0 if that is correct, or make any changes of anything you need to make changes for. It's going to ask you additional financial information. And once again, these are going to be pretty similar to the ones you saw for your parent. Child support you paid. Remember, that's very specific, the amount you paid as the student. Any earnings from a cooperative education program offered by a college, also known as a co-op. And then taxable earnings from need-based employments such as federal work study, need-based employment. Once again, you want to be honest with how you answer this, because federal work study funds can be excluded from your income, which will then help keep your expected family contribution lower. This is a first-year student, so they haven't been able to get work study yet. So we're going to keep that to 0. Now we're going to go through student untaxed income. And you're going to say, did any of these following items apply in 2021? So we're looking back still into 2021. So make sure you answer that appropriately. Most of these questions are the ones we saw for parents, things like child support received, housing, food, and other living allowances paid to members of the military, clergy, and others. One question you will see here that you did not see on your parent section is this final one here. Money received or paid on your behalf, not reported elsewhere on this form. This includes money received from a parent or other person whose financial information is not reported on the FAFSA and that is not part of a legal child support agreement. If you had a situation where your parents are never married or divorced, your FAFSA parent who has been providing this information, you will not be including any financial money or support you received to the parent providing their information on your FAFSA application. But if there's another parent that is not being included as your FAFSA parent, You would include any funds received from them on here as well. Any gifts of cash, any bills paid on your behalf. That's important to keep in mind as well, because that might not seem like a direct cash gift, but it is something you will have to report here. And also keep in mind, this is asking for 2021 numbers only. This is not asking for information of any money you've ever received from anybody ever. This is very specific to 2021. Now you're going to go through your student assets. Once again, these are questions that we already saw for your parents, but now it's being asked of you to provide this information. So you're going to go through, if you have a savings or a checking account, they want to know your current cash value of that particular account. Say you're working a part-time job to save money for your expenses and other things, you want to include that amount here. And keep in mind of the wording. This wording is the same as we saw for parents, as of today. It's not asking you to look back. It's not asking for information of 2021. It's as of today. And then once again, these questions aren't pre-populated with a 0, so you'll have to either input the true number. If none of these apply, then you would just go ahead and input a 0 here to move forward. All right, so you go ahead and complete your student financial section, and look at that. We've been through just about all the sections here. Now it's time to sign and submit. If both you and your parent used an FSA ID in order to log into the FAFSA application, you can go ahead and sign and submit directly online. If for some reason your parent didn't use an FSA ID, or you'd rather mail it in, you do have the option to print the signature page and mail it into the address listed. But first you're going to go through and look at the information you provided and make sure it's correct. If there's anything that's incorrect, you have a few options. You can click on the question and it'll have you jump back to the question that you answered so that you can go ahead and make that change. So here we're going to go and see that, everything's looking like the information we input, and you're going to go through and make sure and see these are blank, but once again, you can go through and add colleges later if you would like, or make updates to your college list. Then you're going to go through section by section and just make sure that you answered all these questions correctly. Any updates or changes you want to make. You're going to notice that there's some questions on here that you didn't see. That's that skip logic in action. Based on the way you answered the questions, the FAFSA determined that it did not need additional information or to qualify you for any of these particular situations. Now, if the way you answered the question triggered a reason for these questions to show up, same kind of thing, you'd follow the same format, read the question carefully, and then determine the best way to answer the question based on what FAFSA is actually asking for. If there's any issue with filing a Schedule 1, you want to make sure that you only list or provide the information of your Schedule 1 filed for either your parent or the student based on what FAFSA is asking for. It may not be asking for the entire schedule, all the information provided on a Schedule 1. It's very specific. So you just want to review this carefully, double check everything, and make sure it's correct and there aren't any changes or adjustments that need to be made. The very end, this isn't done yet, so we actually have to sign and submit. You can print this page, so say you just want to have it for your records. It might be easy to help you in the future or have an idea of what you're working with, or to flag any major changes that you need to talk to financial aid about later for maybe a financial aid appeal or anything like that. Go ahead and hit continue. Before you sign and submit, there will be some questions you're going to see on the 2023-2024 FAFSA form. They are not mandatory. They do not affect eligibility at all. These questions do require an answer, but if you can see, not all of them will have you choose an answer that's specific to you. You can keep your answers vague if you don't feel comfortable sharing this information. And like it's flagging here, these questions do not affect your aid eligibility. So go ahead and answer them how you see fit. And go ahead and hit continue. It's going to ask you to read this before proceeding. It's going to let you know and ask you to certify a few different things about your situation. and this may affect your eligibility for financial aid. May not be forever. It may require something that you have to correct or fix. Say you're certifying that you will only be using your federal and or state student financial aid to pay the cost of attending an institution of higher education. In other words, you're not using this to fund a new car, a spring break. This is strictly for your cost of attending an institution of higher education. That's what these funds are intended for. It's also going to ask you if you're defaulted on another student loan, or if you are not in default on a federal student loan or made a satisfactory arrangement to repay it. You don't owe any money in federal grants, or you've made arrangements to repay it. You certifies that you will notify your school if you default on a federal student loan, and that you will not receive a Pell Grant from more than one school for the same period of time. So you just want to read through this. You're certifying this because this is a legal document. It might feel like it was online, it was simple to do. It is a legal document, it is a federal document. There could be some serious consequences if you lie or provide inaccurate information on your FAFSA form, or for some reason you're certifying that you will use this to attend school, but you're not using it to attend school. Maybe you're using the funds to unfortunately do something illegal. This is reminding you that this is a legal form and you did need to provide information that was correct and accurate. If you do anything purposely to mislead the government, you may be fined up to $20,000 or sent to prison, or both. So you're agreeing to the terms outlined above. Keep that in mind when you're completing this form. Most people are completing the FAFSA application for the correct reasons, so there's no need to worry there, but just make sure you understand what you're submitting and kind of the terms around it as well. You're going to have a few other forms that pop up, especially if you borrow federal student loans, that you're going to have to make some certifying statements as well. Always read the terms and conditions and the fine print. I can never stress that enough. So here we're going to say that we are doing a signature status. Because this is a demo, this is already showing that this application has been signed with your FSA ID, so you can move forward. There's some information here about what you need to do in order to sign and submit the FAFSA. It'll let you know that if your parents aren't present, you can save the form and exit, and then come back and have them sign it. So you can click here to provide a parent signature. There were two parents here that provided information. Remember, parent 1 and parent 2. You can do provide a parent information in here. There's also a certification here, so you're going to outline the terms here and hit OK. Enter the parent's FSA ID to continue. This is simple: username, password, login. For demo purposes, we're going to click on other options to submit. You can sign out electronically if you're eligible with the FSA ID. If you're not eligible to do that, you can print the signature page, which when you click that, it will pop up and this will be printed. And if you notice here at the very bottom, there will be a place to mail the signature page here. You want to make sure to use this address if you're mailing a signature page, the one that pops up from printing it. You do not want to mail it with another one if it's slightly different. You just want to make sure you're mailing it to the appropriate place and it's right on the signature page that you're printing out. That's simple enough there, and that would be associated with the FAFSA that you are completing. And you want to go ahead and sign as a different parent. You're going to be asked the same questions. You can log in with your FSA ID here, and then your other options: print that signature page or submit without signatures, which will require you to return later and choose one of these options. They'll have the same address here as well, with all their information at the top as well. Okay, so for online submission and with printing the signature page, essentially you have gone through the steps of completing the FAFSA. You've gone through all 7 of them, which is fantastic. Great job. The 2023-2024 FAFSA, as you know, has been available since October 1st, 2022, and it can be used to apply for financial aid for anyone attending school between July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. The last day to submit the 2023-2024 FAFSA form is technically June 30th, 2024, but you want to double check your school deadlines and your state deadlines to determine which is the earliest deadline, because that is the most important one. Be sure to check out edvisors.com for any information regarding the FAFSA. Follow us on social media, and also don't forget to download our FAFSA guide, because that can help you through the process, especially if you get stuck. We always tell people to go ahead and file the FAFSA as soon as possible. That way, if you run into any issues, run into any obstacles, you have time to fix it. You don't want to wait to the last day of a deadline and then realize there's something that needs to be fixed or there's an issue. So go ahead, submit your FAFSA form today, or at least get started. You can always use that save key and come back later. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well, and subscribe if you enjoy hearing videos about how to pay for college and getting those tips and tricks to help you through.